Good afternoon, everyone. I think today I'd like to talk to you about what I recall as being one of the most enjoyable periods of my life. It runs roughly from 1962 to perhaps 1975. It was during that period of time that I was actively engaged in being a father, in participating in the conception and then the raising of children. Now, most of you watching me today would assume that, of course, I'm talking about Scott Macaulay Small and Jeffrey Roy Small. And they're certainly part of it. But at least in the participation sense, I have actually been the father of 4 children. And where, you ask, did the other 2 come from? They were the result of magnificent efforts on the part of my sister, Joan Small Manoogian, and her husband, Norman Manoogian. I'd like to quickly observe that Norman Manoogian is the finest brother-in-law ever created on the face of Earth. When Fern and I were conceiving and having children, Joan and Norman were engaged in a similar activity, giving birth to Shannon Manoogian Johnson and her somewhat younger brother, Brian Moore Manoogian. During this period of time, the 2 families lived within driving distance of each other. And we were regularly together on all of the traditional holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas. And whenever there was something interesting to do, we often did it together. And this produced a bonding between Joan and Norman's children and Fern and my children. They called themselves as a gang the Cousins, and they were intensely close, wonderfully interested in what each other was doing. My photo album collection goes back to an early time in the 1960s when all 4 children were photographed in the buff in my bathtub. The children, the cousins, just loved spending time with each other. Regularly, Brian would hide in my car when I was getting ready to drive home from his parents' house with my sons to our home. And halfway there, the 2 boys would start giggling so much that they disclosed Brian's presence, and it was necessary, alas, to turn around and return him to his parents. As our families grew and as adventures and in some cases unpleasantness overtook us, I was always included in what Joan and Norman and Brian and Shannon were doing. I spent untold hours playing with those children. Once Fern moved Scott and Jeffrey to the East Coast, why, the only children I really had were Brian and Shannon. And so I would go to watch their sporting events. And Joan and Norman were avid backpackers in the Sierras, very skilled at it. And they invited me to join them. And we started going into the Sierras each year for 10 to 14 days at a pop. And we took Brian and Shannon with us. And the joy of watching these children grow, the fun that we had in the Sierras, fishing for trout, the occasions when Joan and Norman would want to sneak off into the woods for what I assume were amorous purposes, because they would leave the children with me to supervise. Time goes by, and these young people grow from avid athletes as children to fascinating young people. And their friendship, the bond with my sons, with Scott and Jeffrey, just grew and grew and grew. And they maintained their relationship through mail, through telephones, and then, of course, when iPhones came along, why it became a slam dunk for them to talk to each other all the time. That relationship goes on today. These 4 young people, all college graduates, are now in their late 50s, and I dare say sweet Shannon could possibly be 60. And they're constantly, Jeffrey, particularly in Texas, sees a lot of Brian, who's in Las Vegas, because Brian's business brings him into Dallas, Texas a lot. And so their bonding is really keeping up. Whenever Brian goes to the East Coast, why, he'll track down Scott. And it's been such a warm and fun experience for me. And now, as Norman and Joan and Mel and myself start to get toward the end of the tunnel of life, it's fascinating to watch the care, affection, and attention that Shannon and Brian bring to looking after their parents. Brian's job is such that it's relatively easy and not terribly expensive for him to travel, to come to Palo Alto, California, to see his parents, to help them. Shannon comes down from Sonoma County, where she lives, constantly to see her parents. And Uncle Mac gets lucky, and they come to see him as well, because they do remember that there was a time when I sort of looked after them. And as I reflect back on my life and the things that really made life worthwhile, I am constantly drawn in my memory to these 4 young children constantly being in and out of my life. And what wonderful young people they were. And now that they're, I guess, if you're in your late 50s, you're kind of deemed to be an adult. And they're just magnificent, cool people. And I want there to be a record. And thanks to Steve Hessel and Harambe for doing this, I want there to be a record of my recognition of the extraordinary joy they have brought to me in my life. And that's for sure my story, and I'm damn well going to stick to it. Thank you all for watching.